We are here today speaking with Dr. James Honeycutt, PhD. And so let's have you continue on your line of thought there when you were coming back. I'm sorry, before we left. I'm already ahead of myself instead of behind myself. I'm already ahead of myself in that. So if you will, just go ahead and continue on with that. But there's two questions, and I don't know if you can answer these, so let me see if I can get them out really quick.
Okay.
I'm supposed to ask you about cycles that could be linked to what they call the sidereal, some people call it, time fixed star thing. Are you familiar with any of that? When you're talking about cycles, it's all about cycles. Sidereal cycles? No?
I'm trying to think how to best address that. I understand basically, I think, what the person's asking. Because there are rhythms, there are, within a day, there's circadian rhythms, it's the daily rhythm. Then there are ultradian rhythms, which are the rhythms within a 24-hour cycle. So our sleep cycle is made up of multiple ultradian cycles. Then there are also infradian rhythms, which are the signals that are longer than a 24-hour period. So the seasons of the year are considered to be infradian rhythms, right? And our bodies are all affected by those kinds of things. So these rhythms that emanate from the cycles that are on, if you will, an astronomical scale, from the stars, from the universe, have a much larger time frame than even the seasons that we experience in most cases. And so, you know, we talk about the great alignment that occurred back at the end of 2012 and those kinds of things. So certainly those types of rhythms are important. I haven't done any studies to see how what we can do on a short-term basis can affect those kind of signals, but I would draw a basic conclusion that if our internal clock that we're tied to this Earth, this time frame continuum, is skewed, that we're out of sync with this Earth, then we're going to be out of sync with even those larger clocks, those signals that are from outside of this particular time-space continuum.
I like it. All right.
Another question?
No, I think that was it for the moment. Because
okay.
as you were answering it, then the rest of it got answered by the way you answered the first part of it. So you're all good.
Okay.
You're ahead of yourself now. There you go. Okay.
So Dr. Hallberg did some other interesting things. He noticed when he was first doing his studies with hormones, and this is in the 1950s, you know, post World War II, new discoveries of how these things were affecting the body. They were working with mice, and mice are nocturnal. They're awake at night and sleep during the day. And they would inject them with hormones and then study their blood levels to see how the hormones had affected them and things like that. And his results were not what he expected, right? Every scientist, doctor going into a study creates a hypothesis and says, if I do this, this is what the expected results are going to be. And his results didn't match up. It was suggested to go back and not repeat the test, but re-examine the results based upon the time that the mice were fed and when they went to sleep and woke up. And by doing so, he found a direct correlation between that. One of the things he discovered was that the process that we call transcription, where our cells transcribe the messenger RNA within the DNA of our cells to produce the protein. So our pancreas, for instance, it produces insulin. But that production of insulin is not a 24/7 process. There are cells in the body that have receptors that look for blood sugar levels and cause the pancreas to release insulin into the circulatory system to combine with the glucose in order to make that available for our cells to use. But the producing of that insulin appears to only occur at the upswing of each of these ultradian cycles. So when we are sleeping at night, when we're going from deep sleep and on up to light sleep and then into dream, on that upswing as we're going up is when our body is going to start producing the pancreas is going to produce the insulin. Apparently, so he proposed that medications have a timestamp attached to them that says this is when you should take this medication for the most effectiveness. And today there are some antibiotics that have to be taken at specific times, otherwise they are ineffective. Now, for years we've been told by doctors, you need to take this pill, before a meal or after a meal, or and it was explained to us it's to reduce getting an upset stomach from taking that medication. And while that may be true in some of those cases, some of the times it's because it's based upon when our body is going to actually get access to that medication and be able to use it the most effectively. So what he discovered was that our bodies are only producing these proteins that we need, or these external ones as well, during these ultradian cycles as they're beginning to go from the low to the high level. So what happens is that if our bodies can be affected by wireless signals now, we can interfere with the body's clock. We can interfere, therefore, with the body's ability to produce the proteins that it needs for repair and growth. Now, in the 1950s, the only thing that was strong enough to really cause this interruption that Dr. Hallberg could show was like an X-ray. So let's say you get up at 7 in the morning, you have a 9 a.m. doctor's appointment, and by 10 a.m. you're in front of an X-ray machine to do a chest X-ray. And boom, you get that chest X-ray at 10 a.m. Well, the strength of that chest X-ray was enough to reset your circadian clock. And so your body thinks it just woke up. You just experienced 3 hours of jet lag. So at that night you go home and you have a hard time falling asleep because at 10 o'clock at night your body thinks it's just still 7 o'clock, and you just think you're anxious about the medical test and the X-rays, and that's what's causing you to stay awake. And within a few nights you get back on your normal schedule. So you fast forward to the 1950s, where there was very little wireless stuff buzzing around in the air, to now 2015, and we are just surrounded by all this electromagnetic stuff that's just completely filling the air around us. There are devices people have created that will literally capture that electromagnetic signals out of the air and can use it to charge a battery, or turn on an LED, a light-emitting diode. So this stuff is all around us, and it's having a direct effect upon us. It keeps interfering. So one of the things that I have like to say is that a cell phone may not directly cause cancer, but the cell phone signals could interfere with the body's ability to produce the proteins it needs to repair itself and fight off those naturally aberrant cells that occur during the division process. So the idea is that we want to be able to restore the body's clock. We want to be able to disrupt these other signals that are interfering with our body's clock and have a safe environment for us to be able to operate on a normal physiological schedule. Excuse me.
You have just, wow, I mean, that was a lot of information right there. I mean, when I stop and think about people's sleep habits, my own sleep habits, I live in a fairly rural area, so I don't have as much of that as I would if I lived in a really big city. But I'm thinking about all the EMF signals that are sitting out there, and I'm thinking about my own sleep cycles, and some of it I do kind of look at it as cyclic in nature. I mean, I think we all have our own personal cycles where we have times where we need 8 hours to sleep, and we do that for maybe weeks at a time, and then we switch off, and 4 hours of sleep is enough, and we can get through our day. Sometimes we have to have naps during the day, whatever the case may be. They're just kind of cycles. I always kind of considered them cycles, but I think I'm going to have to start looking at where have I been, and what have I been doing, and what have I been exposed to that may be causing some disruption. Most of my problem recently has been not that I can't fall asleep, I can't stay asleep. Something keeps waking me up all the time. I'm always being awake, and I'm not getting a real restful sleep. And I go to bed tired, I wake up tired, you know, because I'm not sleeping well when I do sleep. And I'm a big, huge dreamer on top of that, so I'm usually really busy when I confine myself in that space. I'm a lucid dreamer on top of that, so I know everything I'm doing. So it's been kind of a weird thing, and I always kind of just looked at it and equated it to what was going on astronomically out there. But I think maybe I might want to bring some of that a little closer to home. So what would you tell somebody like me?
Well, you know, the first thing we did some studies to understand why, you know, what are the things that we can do in our home to improve our sleeping, and, you know, without having to spend any money, just what are the things that we can do just to help ourselves sleep better. It's kind of interesting. I mean, having a decent mattress and a decent pillow obviously are the first things that anybody should have. But what we learned was that the biggest issue that was causing people to have problems sleeping was their alarm clock. If it's a plug-in, even if it's a battery-powered alarm clock, other than a mechanical wind-up one, if it's within arm's reach, it's really too close to your head. So we established a rule of thumb. Everything should be further away from your head than your thumb can reach, so that
okay,
way.
What if you don't have one? I don't have an alarm clock. I haven't slept with one in 15 years.
Okay, so that was the first thing, was removing that out of the way. The other thing was then, you know, when you're recharging any electronic devices, your cell phone, a tablet, whatever, that those also are as far away from your head as possible. The other thing was understanding that if you sleep with your head towards magnetic north, there are energy meridians, the magnetic meridians that you'll pick up energies on, and those can make for very vivid dreams just because of the alignment of the signals that are, you know, within these lines in the earth. So moving your bed so that your head is not at magnetic north will make a difference as well. Obviously, having a dark room is significant. Not having pets that will jump on the bed and wake you up in the middle of the night. So one of the things that we did is that, let me kind of address how, when I have a customer who has insomnias, and they tell me that they're waking up in the middle of the night, they're not sure what's going on. 2 of the sleep programs, Somnius has 8 different sleep programs, so they can have different profiles based upon what your needs are. But 2 of those sleep programs, I wrote them so that when it's producing these sleep cycle synchronizing signals to follow the circadian rhythms. That was a mouthful, sleep synchronizing signals. But
I love it.
I decided that I would change the color of the flashing LED that's on there during the sleep cycle, so that when you were at the deepest level of sleep, it would be red, and then as it moved from deep to not quite as deep, it would be amber, and then yellow for kind of the lower sleep but not quite light sleep, and then on up to green, and then turquoise for light sleep, and blue for very light sleep, and then on up to white and even purple, if you will, for dream sleep. And then what I tell them to do is that put that program in place on your Somnius, slip it under your pillow, and when you wake up in the middle of the night, look at that light, because it flashes once every 30 seconds, so it won't take long for you to see that light. And remember what color light you're looking at. And if it's a red or it's an amber color, that means you were awakened during a deep sleep portion of your cycle. And typically the only reason you get awakened during deep sleep is because there was some external event that occurred, you know, a dog barking, or a gate shutting outside, or somebody bumping the bed, you know, your partner snoring, or it was an internal biological impetus to get up and empty our bladder, which happens as we get older as well. If when you wake up, on the other hand, and if that occurs, you need to identify what the interruption to your sleep is and eliminate that. If when you wake up, it's in the light sleep to the dream sleep area, it's actually very normal to wake up for brief periods of time during our dream cycles, which is how we remember our dreams in the morning, is we have to wake up during that dream cycle to remember what that dream was. If we sleep through the entire dream cycle, then we wake up in the morning and people say, I never dream. Well, we all dream, We just don't remember because we never woke up. We sleep, those people sleep so soundly that they never remember that they dreamt. So we have to wake up. So again, if you wake up and you see that the light is blue or white or purple, you're in the dream range of sleep, and that was natural to wake up. Just try to recall your dream if you want to. Put your head back on the pillow, and the somnolence will lead you back into deep sleep, and you'll follow back into sleep. What's concerning is when people wake up somewhere in the middle, or it's sporadic and they wake up all over the place. Interestingly, we found that for people that are in that category, it usually indicates that they either have a medication that is interfering with their sleep, and sometimes it's just a matter of talking to the doctor and saying, you know, I'm not sleeping well, I'm taking this particular pill, and I think I need to take it at a different time of the day, and work that out with the doctor. Or they might actually have some sort of physiological problem or an illness that they should have addressed as well. Either way, what we found is that for people that are waking up, that it's in different parts of the sleep cycle, or it's right in that middle between light and deep sleep, that they should probably talk to a health professional, whoever they trust, you know, with those kinds of things, and find out what's going on, because those are not normal times to typically be waking up. So that's the other thing, you know, it's just that has actually helped us to identify what's going on. And then what we found is that when a person is able to identify what stage of sleep they were in when they woke up, it also reduces a lot of the anxiety, you know, so what's wrong with me? Why can't I stay asleep during the night? And then that creates more of a feedback loop and keeps us up, and more anxiousness that begins to creep in. So being able to do that has been very helpful for people that have had that problem of being able to stay asleep. The other thing about waking up, though, in the middle of the night that we found interesting is that there are some people who wake up after 3 to 4 hours of sleep, and they actually get up and they find it to be a very productive time of the night for them, and they'll make notes and work on their next interview they're working on, and then be able to go back to sleep after a couple of hours. And so it might actually be a positive thing to wake up. It just depends. Our sleep cycles changed as a people on this planet because of the industrial age. Before the industrial age, you know, it didn't matter when you went to sleep and got up. You had to get up with the cows in the morning to milk them, or to you know, if we had an agrarian lifestyle. But we really rotated around the cycles of the sun and the moon. All of that was what was regulating all of our cycles. It wasn't until people started having to show up at a job at a particular time and, you know, work till a specific time of the day that we began having a lot of these health issues associated with sleep and sleep problems. And so there's just an issue with just the fact that that's the world that we live in, and our bodies for many, many generations weren't used to those kinds of cycles. And then we had to make this amazing shift and interfere with that. And so we have this mindset that we got to fit into this category, that if I'm not getting 7 hours of sleep from this hour to this hour every night, there's something wrong with me. And there may not be anything wrong at all, but it's important to understand what your body's telling you and what you're doing. And the other thing that we also know is that if we have a poor night of sleep, we tend to have a poor day that follows. And if we have a poor day, we tend to have another poor night of sleep. And we get into this vicious cycle of one feeding into the other. We get up in the morning and we have that, you know, initial get up and go, let's get things going, even if we're dragging a little bit. For some reason our energy pops up, but then we get that mid-morning slump and our energy slows down, and we grab another cup of coffee or a candy bar, something to boost our energy up to a level so that we can get through the rest of the day. And then we have lunch, and after lunch we want to take a little siesta, and we take this downtime, but we have work to do, we got things to get done, so we grab another, you know, shot of caffeine or something, or more sugar to put in our bodies, and we artificially start trying to raise our energy levels to meet these cycles. Well, those daily cycles are actually mirrors of our nighttime rhythms. So everybody's familiar with these, I say everybody, most of us familiar with these nighttime cycles of going from dream down to light and then to deep sleep and then coming back up, and we go through these cycles like about 5 or 6 times during the night, up and down like that. Well, during the day our bodies have similar cycles. At night, they're about 90 minutes in length, and during the day, they're about 3 hours in length. And so we get up at 7 a.m., and by 10 a.m., 3 hours later, our bodies are slowing down. And then we come back up, and then we eat lunch, and by 2 p.m. our bodies are trying to slow down again. We need to learn how to be in touch with our bodies, with our own internal rhythms, and plan our days around that so that we can understand how those cycles are working and affecting us. One of the things that I'm working on, and I I need more hours in a day for all of this, it seems like.
For sure.
But one of the things I realized that we needed is I'm writing a little program that you can run on your computer, and I'm doing it on a platform so it will work on PCs and Macs or Androids or iPhones, iPads, etc. It'll be just a little app that you can download. It'll be on our website when it's available. I'll let you know, and we'll get it out there for everybody. But it's a clock, but instead of being just an hour of the day clock, it will actually be a clock that's based on your circadian rhythm, your cycle, your ultradian rhythms, to help you identify during the day whether your body is at highs or lows. And you'll be able to set the time that you got up and when you ate your meals and create a kind of a profile for you so that you can identify what your body's trying to tell you during the day. So when you have to plan that intense conference call or meeting with your boss, you don't do it at a time when your ultradian rhythms are real low and you know you're going to be at a susceptible or vulnerable place. You can schedule that when you're going to be at a more powerful position with your own internal rhythm.
I like that. I do. I want one of those. Okay, we got a question that came in, another one. Does caffeine also reset your clock?
Caffeine doesn't reset the clock. It interferes with that internal cycle. So what it does is it levels out. It doesn't reset our circadian rhythm, but it can flatten out what we call the ultradian rhythm. So that cycle that you're experiencing, that 3-hour cycle during the day where you're going from the high to low, the natural, if you will, bell curve format, although think of it maybe upside down, you're gonna flatten that out, or if it's upside down, you're flattening it out, I should say, because you're trying to raise that energy back up to where it needs to be. The effect of that is that your nighttime cycles are then affected because the nighttime is going to mirror the daytime, and the following day will mirror the nighttime. So on the website, on NuTesla.com, if you go to NuTesla.com, there's a, can I share that on the screen right now?
Absolutely, please do. Yep. Let's see if we can get everyone to see this.
Bring this up here. And if you go to, on our page, NuTesla, at the top there's the navigation bar, and this entry is called Science, and you come down and click on the first entry, which is circadian rhythms. On that page, I have explained a lot of what we've talked about, but there's this wonderful chart that shows the sleep cycles that occur during the night that are on the left-hand side here, and on the right-hand side are the daytime rhythms, the daytime cycles. Maybe kind of hard to read on that, but these cycles then, and these peaks and valleys on the right-hand side that occur during the daytime are actually a mirror that is expanded of what occurred during the night, and then the night is a mirror that's compressed of the daytime. It's flipped upside down from each other. And so when you take caffeine during the mid-morning slump, this area right here, can you see the mouse move perhaps here?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So if you try to raise that up during a mid-morning or the afternoon, the post-lunchtime slump, and try to raise that up with caffeine, then you're going to end up also causing the cycle that on the other side of nighttime to not be quite as high, and you're going to end up not having as much time in the REM cycles that you need for your brain to recharge. We need both daytime and nighttime rhythms. We need them for several reasons. We need them. We need deep sleep because it's during the deep sleep cycles that our bodies, our muscles fully relax and everything can rest, and there's the most restoration and healing that occurs during that deep sleep. As we age, our circadian rhythms, our ultradian rhythms, I should actually say, tend to flatten out, and we don't get as much deep sleep as we ought to get. So our bodies begin to age more quickly because our muscles aren't fully relaxing, and we get tight, and we wake up tight and sore in the morning. Those higher cycles in sleep, the REM cycles, are critical for our mind to continue to grow and expand. I think a lot of the problems we have with dementia and Alzheimer's as we age are because we're not getting that dream sleep that we really need for that mental workout that needs to occur during the nighttime, as well as the mental workouts we need to have during the day. You know, what's interesting is we talk about that people who are mentally active are less likely to develop Alzheimer's or dementia because they're constantly working their brain. They're doing these mental workouts. So that same thing that we do during the day applies at night while we're sleeping as well.
Well, I have to tell you, that was a wonderful answer. I think that he will, or she, I don't know if it was he or she, would enjoy the answer that you gave, and that was a really good presentation. By the way, that was very clear. And for those that are watching and those that will be watching this, you know, as afterwards, not the live show, they'll be able to see that really well, and then they can get a view of your website as well. We got just about 5 minutes. We're going to take another one of those short breaks coming up. James, so what would you like to, where would you like to go from here? What would you like to set up for the next hour? Because, I mean, there's still so much to talk about. We talked about the Somnius, obviously, because we were talking about sleep, but you also have a ton of other information, as well as products, as well as knowledge, just all kinds of good things that you can share. So maybe you'd like to kind of present to us what we may be hearing about after we come back from our short break in just a few minutes.
That would be great. Yes, let's talk about smart meters. There's a lot of controversy about these smart power meters that are going in on homes literally all over the world now, and some of the concerns that are occurring with those, and what we should be aware of with regards to these smart meters and some of the challenges. So we'll talk about that. I'd also like to talk, you know, a little bit about some of the things that's happening in the field of bioelectronics. This understanding of using electronics and biology and marrying the two and what's happening. There's actually pharmaceutical companies that are now making investments into electronics because they're beginning to realize that there is a market that they're going to lose out on if all they're doing is pushing pills. And they're beginning to understand that there are tremendous advances that are occurring. So we'll talk about some of the studies that have been done in that area and what's happening there as well. So there's lots of fun things that we can talk about. I'll talk about some more about some of the different products as we talk about smart meters and some of the bioelectronic things. And then I think for the last half hour we'll really focus on how consumers that are trying to make buying decisions about what to buy, what they need to look for in products when they're looking on the web, what kinds of questions to ask manufacturers. And so while we're out, I need to look and see if I can find. There's actually a few websites I found that are really helpful. I don't know whether any of your viewers are familiar with like Snopes.com, when you can look up information about, you know, fake emails that come around, people saying, right? So Snopes.com. Yeah. Well, there are several websites like that that are really helpful, and I just realized that I should have had that pulled up here. So I may look at that during the break and see if I can find that real quickly.
That'd be wonderful. Okay, you guys, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and take that little short break. We'll be right back with some more, lots of information. I shouldn't say more, lots of information with James Honeycutt, so stay with us.
things. So these rhythms that emanate from the cycles that are on, if you will, an astronomical scale from the stars, from the universe, have a much larger time frame than even the seasons that we experience in most cases. And so, we talk about the great alignment that occurred back at the end of 2012 and those kinds of things. So certainly those types of rhythms are important. I haven't done any studies to see how what we can do on a short-term basis can affect those kind of signals, but I would draw a basic conclusion that if our internal clock that we're tied to this Earth, this time frame continuum, is skewed, that we're out of sync with this Earth, then we're going to be out of sync with even those larger clocks, those signals that are from outside of this particular time-space continuum.
I like it. All right. Sidereal, some people call it, timeline, time, fixed star thing. Are you familiar with any of that? When you're talking about cycles, it's all about cycles. Sidereal cycles? No?
I'm trying to think how to best address that. I understand basically, I think, what the person's asking. Because there are rhythms, there are, within a day, there's circadian rhythms, it's the daily rhythm. Then there are ultradian rhythms, which are the rhythms within a 24-hour cycle. So our sleep cycle is made up of multiple ultradian cycles. Then there are also infradian rhythms, which are the signals that are longer than a 24-hour period. So the seasons of the year are considered to be infradian rhythms, right? And our bodies are all affected by those kinds of. Another question?
No, I think that was it for the moment. Because
okay.
As you were answering it, then the rest of it got answered by the way you answered the first part of it. So you're all good.
Okay.
You're ahead of yourself now. There you go. Okay.
So Dr. Hallberg did some other interesting things. He noticed when he was first doing his studies with hormones, and this is in the 1950s, post World War II, new discoveries of how these things were affecting the body. They were working with mice, and mice are nocturnal. They're awake at night and sleep during the day. And they would inject them with hormones and then study their blood levels to see how the hormones had affected them and things like that. And his results were not what he expected, right? Every scientist, doctor going into a study creates a hypothesis and says, if I do this, this is what the expected results are going to be. And his results didn't match up. It was suggested to go back and not repeat the test, but re-examine the results based upon the time that the mice were fed and when they went to sleep and woke up. And by doing so, he found a direct correlation between that. One of the things he discovered was that the process that we call transcription, where our cells transcribe the messenger RNA within the DNA of our cells to produce the protein. So our pancreas, for instance, it produces insulin. But that production of insulin is not a 24/7 process. There are cells in the body that have receptors that look for blood sugar levels and cause the pancreas to release insulin into the circulatory system to combine with the glucose in order to make that available for our cells to use. But the producing of that insulin appears to only occur at the upswing of each of these ultradian cycles. So when we are sleeping at night, when we're going from deep sleep and on up to
We are here today speaking with Dr. James Honeycutt, PhD. And so let's have you continue on your line of thought there when you were coming back I'm sorry, before we left, I see I'm already ahead of myself instead of behind myself. I'm already ahead of myself in that. So if you will, just go ahead and continue on with that. But there's two questions, and I don't know if you can answer these, so let me see if I can get them out really quick.
Okay.
I'm supposed to ask you about cycles that could be linked to what they call the sidereal